demonstrate a little bit of divine wisdom that God has given to His children at the end of time in these trees. And this is a tree that was planted what we call the Ellen White method. She was given this method in a dream, and I came across this method when I was 13 years old, and every place I've lived from then until now, if I've lived there a year or more, I've planted trees this way. They've all done wonderfully well. This tree is a little over 10 feet tall, and it's just about 3.5 years since we planted them. Now, all of these trees were just 6 inches or so little twigs. These are sequoias, giant sequoia trees. They were little twigs when we planted them. Those that are planted over here are planted the way the forestry department recommends that they be planted. And the tallest of these is this one over here. It's about 4.5 feet tall. So this is about a little over twice the height. But when we look at the size of the trunks and the amount of foliage, we have at least 20 to 1 in mass, the amount of growth. And the same thing will happen with fruit trees, with tomato vines, with grapevines, and other deep-rooted plants if you plant them the same way. Well, we're at the nursery, and we're choosing fruit trees to plant. So when we are choosing a bare fruit tree, we want to look at several things. We want to go down to the graft and make sure that the graft is good, that we don't have. That's a good healthy graft there. We don't want scabs or dead places around it, but that's a good healthy graft, so that's what we need there. Now that is a green gauge plum. We'll make sure those roots are wet and kept wet. We don't want them ever to dry out in the sunshine or the wind, because that would damage this little tree. Let's go over here to a Santa Rosa plum tree. This tree, you see, has some bad places on it here, like this. I would not normally choose this tree, but this is the only Santa Rosa plum left, and it's alive. So we'll go ahead and buy it because we've been asked for a Santa Rosa tree. But I would rather have a healthier tree like the green gauge there. Let's go over and look at the Fuji apple trees. Okay, here we are looking at the Fuji apple trees. And again, we want to look at the graft, make sure that it's a good, strong, healthy graft. And we'll make sure that the roots have been kept wet. If they're out in the sunshine or the wind, we could damage that tree. And in this case, I like this one because it's a nice, healthy looking tree. I prefer this over the split, the one that has 2 branches on it here. But it looks like almost any of these trees in this bin would be acceptable. This one looks particularly good to me, though. So we will choose this and take that with us there. Can I take that tree right there? Thank you. Okay, we're going to take that tree.
Alrighty.
So this is the stuff you want, right? That's the stuff I want. We are in a compost pile. This is the grass clippings, the leaves that have been dumped here for years from this house. And we're fortunate to have it. It's good material there. But what we want to do is simply rake off the dry stuff from on top, and then what's underneath is beautiful compost, and that's what we want for planting that tree. It's got earthworms in it, and it'll just help our little tree grow like crazy there. We'll rake this stuff off, and it'll look like that next year, and be ready for next year's garden there. Okay, now we're looking for leaf mold, another good product to help us plant trees in the garden there. So go to where the leaves are accumulating, where they're heavy under the oak trees here, and rake off what fell last fall, last November, and then underneath that we have leaf mold. There'll be a little bit of soil with it, that's fine, but it's that material that we want that will help us in planting, and we'll just harvest this, take several wheelbarrows full of that, and that's a great material for us.
Look, the wheelbarrow man got busy.
It's okay. So if you don't have enough compost, here's nature making its own compost underneath the trees. If you have pine forest, the pine needles will decompose down. They'll make great amendment for planting your trees and your garden, for that matter. There. I think that's all we need here. All right, now yesterday when I was digging this hole, I noticed that there was a gopher hole right here. And we know that it's active because he's come and plugged this up. So we need to unplug this. We've got it pretty well plugged too. You know what, I need a spoon or some type of little digging instrument there. And we're going to use gopher wire to keep the gopher out, because the gopher will come in and he'll love to eat the roots of our little fruit tree, and very likely could kill it. If I don't get back there far enough, we'll not get the bait, the poison bait for the gopher, and it'll be useless. So I need to dig this out. He did a pretty good job of blocking that up. Boy, he's way back in there. Clogged it up pretty good. Okay, now we're to his hole. I got it now. Thank you, bud. We'll just put several spoonfuls of gopher bait back in there. And he won't come while there's activity. He won't come here, and of course we'll have this closed up. Okay, I'm reading from something that Herbert Clarence White, the grandson of Ellen G. White, wrote. He taught this way of planting for years, and I had the privilege of taking his class when I was 13 years old. Anyway, he says you start by digging a large hole. In this case, about 3 feet by 3 feet, 3 feet down and 3 feet across. We separate the subsoil from the topsoil. There, you can tell the difference in the colors there. And then in the bottom of that hole, we place a couple of pipes. The purpose for that is to get air in the bottom of that hole. Okay, now use what you have. I've used a couple of different short pieces of pipe for the air. We just throw those in the bottom of the hole. Another way to get air in the bottom of that hole is to take a gallon or so plastic rigid planting pot and just turn it upside down, and that'll get air in the bottom of the hole too. So let's just do that. Turn your planting pot, make sure it's sturdy enough that it won't collapse under the weight, and then when you put this down, if you can put a flat rock against it, that'll keep it from filling up with mud. But the principle is just that we have air in the bottom of that hole there, and that's more than adequate. Now we're going to start filling this hole up. We're going to use equal part mixture of the topsoil and compost and leaf mold that we collected from the property here. Or if you don't have it, you can buy it, but usually you'll find some stuff around your property that's usable. And then we want to get some manure in there too. And since we don't have any animals on this property, we did buy some manure, and we'll throw that in there. Then an ingredient which is very important is phosphate. Phosphate is the carrier to take all the other nutrients and put into the plant. And so we need to get phosphate, and the type I like the best is soft rock phosphate. If you can't get that, get some other rock phosphate. But make sure you have phosphate in your soil mix there. And another ingredient which is extremely important is calcium. And calcium is deficient in most soils in America today. We need the calcium in order to make what's called high brix food, or high nutrition food. And if the calcium is there, the produce will be sweeter and better and more nutritious. And so that's why we want to put some calcium in too. Okay, now here's our soft rock phosphate, and that's 2 cups, which is about 2 pounds. And we're going to want about 5 pounds in our mixture that goes in the bottom of the hole, and about 5 pounds that goes in the mixture on top of the hole. And you'll see that in the diagram there. But let's just mix this up. Okay. Now, when Ellen White was talking about dressing, she was talking about barnyard manure and the straw that comes out. She was talking about the leaf mold and the compost. Those are all called dressings. And what we want to do is mix this. Jeff, let's start mixing in the topsoil too. There. Matter of fact, let's, yes, if some of this starts falling in, it's okay. So let's take a shovelful of topsoil, and a shovelful of compost, and a shovelful of leaf mold, and we'll just keep doing that. Okay, this is pelletized lime or high calcium lime. And lime is, or calcium is a nutrient that we absolutely need in almost all soils. So I've got a couple cups here. We'll mix this in. This will go in the bottom. What we're mixing now will go in the bottom 1/3 of that hole there. So we just mix this up a little more, Jeff. Now for the lime, you can use agricultural lime, which is dolomite lime. You can use gypsum, depending on whether you're in a dry area or wet area. You can use this high calcium lime that I just put on. If you're in a wet area, the dolomite lime is usually better to use because in wet areas your soil tends to be acidic, and so that will tend to neutralize it. If you're in a dry area, then you probably want to use the pelletized lime or gypsum, which will not change your pH in the soil there. Okay, I think we should start filling that hole, and I'm going to, for micronutrients in the soil, we're going to use some kelp meal. Now, if you don't have everything that I'm showing you today, don't put off planting your trees. You can add the kelp meal later. I'll also use some ocean water. If you don't have ocean water, don't let it stop you from planting the trees. You do need the phosphate and some calcium, and then whatever organic materials that you have available that you can get. But please use what you have and get the trees in the ground, because you can supplement, you can feed them afterwards. Matter of fact, you should feed them regularly, at least once a year there. All right, this is kelp meal, and I want you not to overdo kelp meal. It's like salt, might be necessary. We put it on because it has many micronutrients. It's grown in the ocean, and there are probably over 60 different minerals in the kelp meal. But you don't want to overdo it, because you can actually stunt growth if you overdo it there. Okay, that's about a half a cup full. Now, the place to get this is not the garden store. Go to the feed store, and they feed this to horses and other animals, and mix it in with their feed, and it has the effect of making their coats absolutely beautiful and healthy because of all those micronutrients in it there. Now, again, if you don't have this available, don't let it hold up planting. I'm going to show you another place to get micronutrients. Now, this is ocean water. It's salty. You wouldn't want to drink it. This is Pacific Ocean water. Doesn't matter which ocean it comes out of, the Pacific, the Atlantic, the Indian Ocean, the Antarctic, Arctic. Ocean water is all the same, identical consistency, one element as to another. And every element that is in the atomic chart that you studied as in chemistry in high school, is in ocean water with the exception of some of the gases. So there will be about 90 different elements in this quart of ocean water. So, and all was in the same identical balance. And if you don't live close to an ocean, but you can get it out of the Dead Sea, it'll have the same consistency. If you get it out of the Great Salt Lake, it's the same. Those two bodies, the Dead Sea and the Great Salt Lake, have less water and more solids than the oceans do. But the consistency or the percentages of one to the other are absolutely identical. Interesting fact is that if you were to analyze human blood, that ocean water and human blood are almost identical there. Now this has all the salt in it, whatever, that's okay. We're gonna go ahead and put this in here. Okay, let's just go ahead and mix this, Jeff, and we'll start putting stuff in. Now, what we've done so far is to mix the soil and the nutrients with it, the phosphate and the lime. And now we fill the 1/3 bottom of this hole. So the third bottom of your planting hole is with this rich soil. We need to compact this a little bit, tramp this down enough so that we won't have excessive settling later. That's probably about enough. Okay, the next thing we're going to do here is that Ellen White talks about putting in a layer of rock. And people immediately think, well, that's for drainage. It's not. That layer of rock is to change the electrical force in the ground. Now, Ellen White did not say that, but we have discovered that since. A fellow by the name of Ian Jones did a lot of work and research on that, and we can measure the difference in the electrical current in the soil. Now plants take up nutrients with these tiny little hairline roots, and they bargain with the soil, exchanging them, and that's an electrical exchange, an ion for an ion. And so this next thing is important, and we just need a layer of rock in there. Just the rocks that I took out of that hole, we're just going to throw back in there. If you don't have rocks on your property, get several bucketfuls of gravel and you can use that instead. But anything from gravel to even softball size is just fine there. Okay, now some people have spread the rocks all out through the whole planting hole. But that's not the instruction from Ellen White. She said a layer of rock. And so I do it this way. I planted both ways. I haven't done enough of it to say that there's a difference. But she did say a layer of rock, and so that's why I've done it this way. The next thing we're going to do is to fill up the next 1/3 of that hole with just plain topsoil. No amendments in it whatsoever, just the plain topsoil. So I'll start doing that now. Run out of the topsoil, but we've got to have enough in here. Okay, now I want to add a little bit of cottonseed meal. Again, don't buy it at the nursery. Buy it at your feed store, and it should cost you about $16 for a bag full of it. And we're using it for nitrogen. Now, if you don't have it, don't let it stop you from planting your trees, your garden. But if you do have it, then a little nitrogen here will help. It's an excellent organic source of nitrogen. We need nitrogen, but we don't want that to be the dominant fertilizer again. We want the phosphate to be the carrier. Whenever we get nitrogen as the dominant carrier of the nutrients into the plant, we get weak, sick plants. We get plants that grow fast, a lot of leaves, a lot of stems, but we get weak, sickly plants, and we get produce that is not as healthy to eat. Okay, I have a boulder, I don't know, it might be 20 pounds or so, and we're going to put that right in the bottom of that hole. Remember, we're 2/3 of the way full now, and then as soon as we have the soil properly mixed, we'll cover that. Then we're going to take our little tree roots and we're going to spread it out over that rock, and that's for an anchor for that tree. Now, if you were planting a tree that has a taproot, a deep taproot, then dispense with this rock. It'll just get in your way. And if you don't have that rock, don't let it stop you from planting. Just go ahead and plant. It's only for an anchor. It's not that important here. Okay, we've got our gopher basket here, and we cut the bottom out because we don't want the wire to totally encase it. But we've cut that out, and we've gone, this is 24 inches, and we can sink this in the ground below the gopher's normal tunneling area. So when he comes to this wire, he's going to come up. He won't go down, he'll come to this, and then he'll come up. And we need a little bit of wire on the top, because when he comes up this far, he's going to realize that to get over, he has to expose himself to maybe an owl or a hawk or a skunk or other predator, and he doesn't want to be dinner for them. If the top of the soil is the top of the basket, or gopher wire, then he'll tunnel up here. When he gets to the top of the soil, he'll walk over and go right back down. So that's why we need a little of this sticking out of the ground to make sure that he stays outside and our plant is on the inside protected there. Okay, now where did that big rock go? Let's put that in. Thanks, Jeff. Okay, let's fill this with nice, this mixture of soil that we have. Well, yes, put a couple of shovelfuls just on top of the rock here. Thank you. One more on that side. There, and we've got it. Okay, that's good. Okay, now let's take the plain topsoil, no amendments mixed with it, and we'll put it around here. Yeah. Okay, now we kept our tree roots covered because we don't want them to dry out with wind or sun, so keep them covered the whole time. There, and these roots have already been pruned when they harvested the trees and sent them to the nursery. And the nursery pruned the top of the tree because we asked them to do that. So, Jeff, go ahead and get me some good soil here. That's great. Okay. Okay. Okay, now we don't want to cover the graft. Okay, we can just fill up the rest of this with our mixture here. Is it mixed? This was mixed over here, okay. You know, you can throw in a little bit of topsoil to mix it too at the same time.
Yeah.
Go ahead and throw some more on there, Jeff. Yeah, go ahead and put some more on there. Yeah, our hole only came to about here, but we put the dike out here, and now we've put good soil all the way to the edge here, and so that tree will go out and go into that good soil. But we've got the depth, and it can go out as well here, which will be just fine. Now, what I've got in this bucket is a shovelful of really nasty compost that came out of my backyard. It's just cold where I threw the kitchen scraps for a compost pile. And so I want earthworms, and I know there are plenty of earthworms there. So what I've done is take some earthworms. This is just to plant earthworms. And there, see these big old guys? And in a few months they'll multiply to hundreds and even thousands there. What they will do, these are red wigglers. Another name for them is compost worms. Another name is manure worms. And they don't go very deep in the ground, maybe 16, 18 inches. And then there's a second type of earthworm that would really be helpful in your garden, and that's the night crawlers. Now, night crawlers won't eat manure. These guys will eat manure. But the night crawlers will eat the manure that these guys leave behind. But the night crawlers will go deep into the ground. Sometimes when we're building and we're putting in a septic system or we're putting in a foundation that's deep, I've seen night crawlers way down in the soil, maybe 6, 8, even 10 feet underneath the surface. And especially in dry California, they'll go down there in the summertime. It's cooler and there's some moisture there. So they go down there and hibernate. But you can see that if you have a combination of these two worms, the earthworms on the surface, the red wigglers on the surface, they'll take down the leaf mold and the grass clippings and anything we put around this, and then the night crawlers will create that deep, they're digging your soil for you. They're actually doing a far better job than we could do. So I went down about 3 feet here. Those guys will go a lot further than that, and that'll be channels to take down moisture and nutrients, and those will be little channels that tree's roots will follow, so that it will be a much healthier tree in the long run. So between the earthworms, those two types that we have here, there are many different types of earthworms, but those two are pretty common in North America. If you don't have them on your ground naturally, find an organic gardener who will give you a handful of them, or go to a bait shop, a fishing store, and you can buy live worms in little cottage cheese cartons and bring them home and plant them there. Then if they have moisture and food and warmth, they'll multiply like crazy, and they'll hibernate. They'll go down below the frost line. But they'll do a wonderful job of tilling your soil and making your soil very rich, and providing good food for you there. Okay, now let's take, this is the pure compost over here. Okay, let's take pure compost and put an inch or two of it all the way around there. Do we have a rake handy? It's still down there. Do you have a rake in the back of the car? No? Okay. It's okay, we'll do it. We'll do it this way. I just wanted this somewhat level here. Close enough. Don't need to be that much of a perfectionist, Tom. Good enough. Okay. Okay. As you mow the lawn, rake the leaves up, whatever, you can put a layer of mulch around that tree, and those earthworms will multiply and come up and take that down. Some people like to put a layer of rocks on top of the mulch. The mulch should be maybe 2 or 3 inches deep, 2, 3, 4 inches deep. Some people like to put a layer of rocks on top of that. If you have this tree in a landscaped area, you might want to do that. If you do that, then about every 6 months, the earthworms will eat all of what's underneath that away. And you'll have to throw the rocks out, put more mulch down, and cover it up again. So when it's out in the garden like this, I don't use the rock mulch. I simply throw more mulch on top. Now that means that the top layer is almost always dry, and the earthworms won't take down what's dry. But just keep adding to it, and then what was dry will be covered and get wet and get eaten down that way. You can put too much mulch on. One case, a few miles from here, I had mulch about like this. A landscape gardener was dropping his grass clippings for me, and this was on eucalyptus trees. And I began to lose eucalyptus trees, pretty good sized ones, maybe that big, and some of them were 15, 20 feet tall. I began to lose them, and so I dug down to find out what was happening. And here I was watering these things like crazy, and the water was all running off because the mulch kept the water from going down. So if you see a problem in the garden, go look at it. See what you're looking at. Dig down there and see what you can find. You'll often find the problem and be able to correct it there. Okay, this is something that might save your tree. Just take a big can and cut it. Take the top and the bottom out of it and cut it. Then we'll put it around the trunk of the tree. We'll push it down into the soil a bit there. Okay, now what that is for is so that mice won't get into the trunk, or even worms, cutworms, and eat the bark around your tree and kill that tree. So in this case we've got a gopher cage, so it's less necessary, but in some cases you're going to want to put some type of a can around, or some type of a protection. It doesn't have to be a can, it could be plastic even. But you want that protection so that the tree does not die. Another thing we haven't talked about much here is that we do have a dike around, and that's so that when we water, there's a place to hold the water. We're on the side of a hill, and if we just came out here and watered this, the surface would get wet, and then it would start running down over the side, and people would think, you'd think, well, I've watered enough, water's running down the driveway. You need a dam, you need a dike, so that the water will sit there and will soak in to the ground. And if you have any questions about whether your water is getting in or not, take a shovel and dig down a little bit and see for yourself how far down that water goes. People are usually shocked at how little bit of the surface is being moistened. And those roots, you've got to get the water down where those roots are going to get the moisture. Otherwise, you're trying to grow a plant with just an inch or two of moisture and soil on the surface, and that's not going to work. You're not going to get good results with that. So anyway, that's a good way of doing it. Make it level so that the water can sit in that basin, maybe an inch or 2 inches. And in California, in the hot sunshine in the summertime, we add about 2 inches minimum a week, and watch the tree, watch the soil, dig down and see whether you need more moisture or not, and adjust your watering accordingly there. Okay, let's water this. Yeah, let's just go ahead and pour it on here.
I'll get some more.
Yes, please. Okay, we have a pretty deep hole there. If you remember, it was 3 feet wide and about 3 feet deep. And so it'll take a lot of water to water that the first time. And this is the spring of the year, early March. So it'll need less water now than a little bit later. Remember that the root ball on that was not very big. They just had these few little roots. So it's very important that those roots stay moist until this plant can get going. And if this were in my own yard, I would want it watered daily until it really takes hold. There, you can overwater. You can kill a tree, you can kill a plant easily by having too much water, and that floods it. So again, take your shovel and just dig down occasionally and look at what the moisture looks like there. And see what you're looking at. You have a problem anywhere in the garden, take your shovel and go down and see what the problem is. Too much water, not enough water. Usually in California it's not enough water, but I've seen people kill trees too with too much water there. We probably should put at least 20 gallons of water on this. This is somewhat dry material, especially by the time we mixed in all of the compost and leaf mold. And this first year is going to be absolutely critical. We probably need to water almost every day, except when it's cool, until the fall rains come again. Because in this part of the world, we're not going to have rain now until October or November. And this is March right now. So we need to water that regularly, make sure that it's comfortable there. Okay, that's about 15 gallons, and let's do that one more time, Jeff, and then we'll call that enough for today. There. Okay, that's better than 20 gallons on there, isn't it, total? Yeah. What do you think, Jeff? Think we got enough on there? I think so. I think so. Yeah. That pretty much finishes our planting of this tree. Thank you. And if this seems too complicated, just try it on one little tree. You'll see an absolute miracle in your garden. And remember that this is not my wisdom or some master gardener's wisdom. This was given as divine wisdom to God's church for the end of time. So use it and you'll get great results. Thank you.